Today on Face the Nation, Mitt Romney picks his man.
The next president of the United States, Paul Ryan.
Well, not quite. Let's try that again.
Every now and then, I'm known to make a mistake. I did not make a mistake with this guy. But I can tell you this, he's going to be the next vice president of the United States.
Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin has lots of appeal to both sides. He's been preaching what conservatives like to hear.
We have the largest deficits and the biggest federal government since World War II.
But Democrats like the pick, too. They say his plan to cut Medicare and social programs is sure to drive voters their way. Ryan is with Mitt Romney in North Carolina this morning, and we'll get the latest there from Jan Crawford. The Obama campaign's Stephanie Cutter will square off against the Romney campaign's Eric Fehrnstrom, and we'll hear from one-time Republican candidate Newt Gingrich, who was not all that keen during the primaries about Paul Ryan's Medicare plan.
I don't think right-wing social engineering is any more desirable than left-wing social engineering.
Plus, we'll have analysis from all sides. Newsweek Daily Beast contributor David Frum, Washington Post columnists Michael Gerson and Ruth Marcus, Politico's Roger Simon, Bob Shrum from The Week, and our own John Dickerson. It's all about two visions of where we go from here, and it's all on Face the Nation.
And now from CBS News in Washington, Face the Nation with Bob Schieffer. Substituting for Bob Schieffer, Nancy Cordes.
Good morning again and welcome to Face the Nation. Bob Schieffer is on his way to High Point, North Carolina, where he'll be sitting down with Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan later today in their first joint interview, which will air on tonight's 60 Minutes. So you'll want to tune into that. But for now, with the latest on this new Republican ticket, I'm joined by CBS News political correspondent Jan Crawford, who is in Mooresville, North Carolina this morning. And Jan, we're learning that there was quite a bit of subterfuge involved in keeping this running mate pick under wraps. Tell us about it.
Well, Nancy, it was almost something out of a spy novel, the lengths that they went to keep this a secret. It involved Paul Ryan when he was going to meet with Romney in Boston to be offered the pick, actually almost being in disguise. He had sunglasses, a baseball cap, casual clothes so he could move through the airports. And then when he was going to Virginia to be announced as the nominee, he sneaked out the back of the house and went through the woods to get his ride. And last night on the campaign plane, Romney and Ryan came back and talked to the reporters, and they seemed almost tickled to death that they kept all this a secret. Now, there is clearly a strong, good rapport between these two guys as they were talking to us last night. And Nancy, I have never seen Romney as energized and enthused as he was in his campaign speeches yesterday in Virginia. And we'll see some of that tonight in Bob's interview.
Big crowds behind you as well. All right, Jan Crawford in North Carolina with the Romney campaign. Thanks so much. Joining us now to talk about Mitt Romney's pick, our deputy campaign manager for the Obama campaign, Stephanie Cutter, who is in Chicago this morning, and Eric Fehrnstrom, senior advisor to Mitt Romney, who joins us from Charlotte, North Carolina. And Eric, let's start with you. Describe for us how and when Mitt Romney offered the VP slot to Paul Ryan and what he said when he accepted.
Well, he called him on August 1st, but on that day, the governor had just returned from his overseas trip. He had made his decision that he wanted Paul Ryan to join him on the ticket. He reached out to him, set up a meeting, and the meeting took place on August 5th. That was last Sunday. They met at the private home of Beth Myers, who is a top aide and handled the vice presidential selection process. And it was in a private meeting in Beth's dining room. Where Governor Romney offered Paul Ryan a spot on the ticket, and he accepted.
Eric, there were obviously a number of politicians under consideration, Rob Portman, Tim Pawlenty. What was it about Paul Ryan that made him the choice for Mitt Romney in the end, and was this a difficult decision?
It wasn't difficult at all for the governor. This was a big, bold, courageous choice by Governor Romney. It indicates that he's not only interested in taking on the jobs crisis in this country, but he also wants to address the fiscal crisis as well. This is no time for complacency. We have 23 million Americans out of work. We have more people falling into poverty than at any time in our recent past. And we have massive debt and deficits that imperil our future. And I think in the selection of Paul Ryan as a running mate, Mitt Romney has claimed for the Republican ticket the mantle of change. I think it also indicates that Mitt Romney's going to be running an issue-oriented campaign waged on big ideas and not engage in the type of nasty, negative politics that we've seen from the Barack Obama campaign.
Well, Stephanie, what do you think about that? Was this the running mate that the Obama campaign was expecting, and is he a big, bold choice?
Well, I definitely think he's a big, bold choice because it really does say something about Mitt Romney. It says something about Mitt Romney that he's picking someone who has a budget plan under which Mitt Romney would pay less than 1% in taxes, but the middle class would pay more than $2,000 more in taxes. It says something about Mitt Romney that he picks someone with a budget plan that cuts 10 million kids, cuts their college scholarships for 10 million kids, throws 200,000 kids off Head Start, cuts veterans benefits, clean energy benefits, all of the investments we need to grow our economy. And it says something about Mitt Romney that he chose someone who has a budget that really it would be the end of Medicare as we know it, would increase costs on seniors and throw them into the private market. So that is big, bold, and courageous, but I don't think that's the prescription the American people are looking for. I heard Eric talk about the type of campaign that we're running compared to the type of the campaign that Mitt Romney is running. We'd love to have a substantive debate. As of yesterday, Mitt Romney put some substance on the table. We'd love to talk about it. The Romney-Ryan budget is not a budget for growth and prosperity. It's a budget for redistributing wealth to the top, taking it from the middle up to the top.
Eric,
and
I want to ask you
for
about that because you knew that this was the argument that you were going to hear from Democrats. By picking Paul Ryan, is Mitt Romney tying himself to every element of the Ryan plan, the cuts to college loan programs and food stamps and Medicaid? Can he separate himself from that, or is he embracing it?
Well, let me just answer Stephanie by saying this is the same type of garbage talk from the Obama campaign we've heard almost since day one. They've started off with petty, untrue characterizations of Mitt Romney and his record, and have now grown to massive exaggerations. Look, Paul Ryan has a budget. Barack Obama has no plan. He's the sitting president, and it's amazing that he has no policy agenda for his second term. No new ideas about how to get this economy moving, no new ideas about how to create jobs, no new ideas about how to control spending. He promised to cut the deficit in half. Instead, it's exploded in size. He's added $5 trillion to our deficit. Our country can't continue down this path. Now, we're making a bet. We're making a bet that Americans are more interested in a campaign that's waged on real ideas, including entitlement reform, and that a substantive campaign conducted on the high ground is going to trump the type of petty, negative politics that we're hearing from Barack Obama. They're really running a campaign without a conscience. If I had to give their campaign playbook a title, I'd call it 50 Shades of Mud.
I think we've seen some petty negative politicking from both sides this week, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But Stephanie, what about this argument by Republicans who point to Paul Ryan's plan and say, hey, it may not all be popular, but at least he's making the tough choices. We've got a $15 trillion debt. We've got entitlements that are exploding, and at least he's willing to put his plan out on the table, while the president, at least initially, did not embrace his plan, the Bowles-Simpson plan.
Well, Nancy, all you have to do is go to the White House website to see the president's plan. It's been out there for more than a year. It's a $4 trillion deficit reduction plan that does make those tough choices, but it makes tough choices on both sides. It's not an ideological document like Paul Ryan's plan. It actually asks the wealthy to pay their fair share, cuts waste from spending, programs that we don't need, but still allows us to make the critical investments we need to grow our economy. Now, I want to answer Eric for a second. He thinks that talking about the substance of Paul Ryan's plan, the Romney-Ryan plan, is mudslinging. Then what type of election do you think this is? These are the issues that matter. Everybody knows the fundamental issue at stake here is the middle class. If you're not going to talk about how you're going to strengthen the middle class, then how can you have a substantive debate?
But you said that the president talks about his plan on the website, but what about on the campaign trail, Stephanie? Mostly on the campaign trail, we hear him talking about raising taxes on the top 2%. Where are the other bold plans that require sacrifice from the rest of the country?
WhiteHouse.gov, Nancy. Go there and you'll see the entire plan. He's given speeches in front of Congress on it. He does talk about it on the campaign trail. It's the only serious deficit reduction plan out there right now.
What is the president's plan
Everybody knows. Why don't you ask independent economists what they think about the Paul Ryan budget? It's not a serious document. It doesn't do one thing to create one job.
Tell them what the plan is right now.
Okay, I want to switch gears here.
I'll be happy to tell you what the plan is right now.
What is it?
Well, ask the wealthy to pay a little bit more. Cut waste from the government. Reform Medicare, more than $300 billion in savings from Medicare, on top of the savings we've already achieved. You know, I heard Mitt Romney deride the $700 billion cuts in Medicare that the president achieved through health care reform. You know what those cuts are? It's taking subsidies away from insurance companies, taking rebates away from prescription drug companies. Is that what Mitt Romney wants to protect? And interestingly enough, Paul Ryan protected those cuts in his budget, and that's the only thing that extended the solvency of the Medicare program.
What about
that's
that point?
A serious debate.
What about
that's
that point,
how you
Eric?
have a serious substantive debate about the issues.
Eric, what about that point that you're not just
Yeah.
cutting the social safety net pretty drastically under
You're
the Paul Ryan
ending
plan,
Medicare.
but you're changing Medicare pretty significantly, and you're lowering
It's the
taxes
beginning of the
very
end of
significantly
Medicare.
on the wealthy.
Yes. Nancy, let me just say, I agree with Stephanie. We should cut waste from the federal budget. But we need to go further than that, Stephanie. We need to put on the table serious substantive proposals that address the entitlement problem. These are the cost drivers in the budget. Mitt Romney has talked about, with respect to Social Security, lengthening the retirement age and changing the benefit calculations such that upper income earners, for our future retirees, will not be earning benefits at as fast a rate as they used to. With respect to Medicare, he's got two core principles, and they happen to sync up with Paul Ryan. The first is we're not going to do anything that will affect current beneficiaries or those who are close to retirement age. But for future retirees, we need to create a new premium voucher program that preserves the existing Medicare system as an option, but also introduces new private health care options so that we can have competition and choice. If we do that, then we'll finally begin to get a hold of the massive budget busters in the federal budget and put us on a path towards sustainability.
There are a lot of similarities, Eric, but what about that?
In great detail,
what about the fact that your
I just told you in great detail and specifics what Mitt Romney's plan is with respect to entitlements, and your response is Barack Obama is going to cut waste from the budget.
All right, we don't have a lot more time, so I want to move on to another topic,
Nancy,
Eric.
I do have one question for Eric. Does Eric think it's right for this country for Mitt Romney to pay less than 1% in taxes, but you're asking senior citizens who rely on Medicare to pay up to $6,000 more for their health care? Does he think that's right? For Mitt Romney to pay less than 1% in taxes, but the middle class gets a $2,000 tax increase. That's the budget that Paul Ryan has on the table, and that's the budget that you just wrapped your arms around.
Stephanie, you just told us, you just admitted there's only one candidate in the race who has cut benefits for current Medicare beneficiaries. That's Barack Obama. And he didn't do it, by the way, to create
Eric, I want to ask you a question on another topic because we don't have that much more time. Eric, I want to ask you about foreign policy for a moment. Obviously, Paul Ryan knows his way around a budget, but is it a problem that neither of the two men on your ticket have any significant foreign policy experience? I mean, we're in a time of great instability in the Middle East, a civil war in Syria, tensions with Iran. Is it a problem that these two men, while very experienced, don't have much experience on the world stage?
I think Paul Ryan has the same amount of foreign policy experience that Barack Obama had when he was sworn in as president. Look, Paul Ryan's been in the Congress for 14 years, longer than Barack Obama when he decided to run for president. He's got oversight responsibilities for the budget, including the defense budget. He has leaders, governors, generals, members of the military brass calling him for advice and support for their programs. Of course he's prepared. One of the first criterions that the governor had for the selection of his running mate was he wanted somebody who was capable of stepping into the top job if circumstances ever called for that. He's got that with Paul Ryan. But I think what Americans will really like about this ticket is the way they complement one another. Mitt Romney has 25 years of private sector experience, a wealth of knowledge about the economy, and what Paul Ryan brings to the table is deficit-cutting credibility. and also knowledge about every nook and cranny of the federal budget. And as I said, this indicates Mitt Romney is serious about solving the jobs crisis in this nation and also the fiscal crisis.
Stephanie, very quickly on foreign policy.
Well, I think that the most important criteria is the person at the top having the judgment on foreign policy that you need in a commander-in-chief. And I think that we saw just a week and a half ago that Mitt Romney didn't have it. He went on a foreign policy trip and ended up insulting every one of our allies and embarrassing this country. So I think that was proof positive that Mitt Romney doesn't have the judgment necessary to be America's commander-in-chief. And whether Paul Ryan can help him with that, we'll see. But I think it's the person at the top that you need to see if they can
Stephanie
pass that
Cutter,
test.
Eric Fehrnstrom, thank you both so much for joining us this morning. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more from both of you. And we'll be back in 1 minute with former Republican presidential candidate Newt Gingrich. Stick around.
I'm excited for what lies ahead. I'm thrilled to be a part of America's comeback team, and together, we will unite America and get this done.
It's something you're born with and lives inside you. Inspires the things you choose to do. Things that may not always change the world in a big way, but can change it in a million little ways. You do what you do because it matters. At HP, we don't just believe in the power of technology. We believe in the power of people when technology works for you. To do the things that matter. To dream. To learn. To create, to work. If you're going to do something, make it matter.
And we're back now with Newt Gingrich. Newt, thank you so much for being here this morning. Great to see you. So back in April, President Obama said the Ryan budget is so far to the right, it makes your contract with America look like the New Deal. How does the Ryan plan look to you now? How much of it do you think that Romney should keep? How much should he discard?
Well, I think the basic thrust of the plan, which is very parallel to what Romney's proposed, is the right direction. We have to go to a sustainable, long-term budget that gets us back to a balance, that accelerates the growth of jobs, and that is affordable. And we have to recognize, you look at American cities going bankrupt. The Greek government just announced they have 54% unemployment among young Greeks. You look at the kind of problems around the world, from spending being out of control, and you have to say to yourself, somebody has to have the guts to stand up and offer a roadmap, if you will. And I think that the effort that Ryan has put in makes, in my mind, makes him an extraordinarily exciting choice, because you now have a national leader who is capable of talking in detail with the American people about some very complicated topics. And that's a very unusual moment in American history.
I traveled to Wisconsin after Ryan unveiled his budget in 2012, and it was highly controversial, even in his home district. Sure. How does it play with voters? I mean, the Obama campaign is already saying this is going to help them in states like Florida and Pennsylvania with large senior populations who are going to be worried about his Medicare plans.
Well, and see, this is an example of I think, what's wrong with the Obama campaign, what we just saw a few minutes ago in that dialogue. The Romney team doesn't touch anybody who's over 55. So it's a non-event. It's just plain a lie to run a campaign trying to scare people who are over 55 about this plan. And because Paul Ryan listened, he came back with Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. They've developed an improved Medicare proposal. If you want to keep the current system, you can. If you would want to keep an alternative, you can. Almost exactly what members of Congress have. Right. So you have the choices. I think you can have an honest debate about it, but when you start with an Obama plan which took $700 billion out of Medicare in order to put it into Obamacare, I think they're going to have a pretty hard time being credible in trying to scare people about Paul Ryan.
So let's take a look at the specifics of his plan then. Here are the broad outlines. It calls for $5 trillion in spending cuts, which is huge. That's more than 2 times the Simpson Bowles proposal. So it's really dramatic spending that reduces the size of government. But he also cuts tax revenue almost as dramatically, by $4 trillion, primarily by bringing tax rates down for wealthy Americans and by reducing the corporate tax rate from 35% to 25%. So this is the opposite approach from Simpson-Bowles, which actually raises tax revenue. And what you get as a result is that it would take until 2040 before we have a budget surplus.
Well,
is that the right approach? Why not ask everybody to make some sacrifice?
One of the great debates, which we're not going to have but should, is over the Congressional Budget Office and their method of scoring, because it's just factually false.
How so?
Ryan and Romney have a very specific challenge, and I think this will be the key debate for this fall. Do you want a country with a smaller government, a bigger economy, and more jobs? Or do you want a country with a bigger government, a smaller economy, and fewer jobs? Now, that's the honest choice here. And I think, look, Obama and Biden...
But that was not always your take on his plan. No. You called it right-wing social engineering. What has changed for you about the
one thing I objected to back in May of 2011 was that he eliminated Medicare for everybody. He came back with Ron Wyden. He listened. And one of the things I give Paul a lot of credit for is he really listens. And he came back with an improved Medicare plan that Ron Wyden has co-sponsored as the only bipartisan reform, by the way, Paul Ryan and Ron Wyden introduced. And it basically allows people to stay in the current system. So he met my only objection. The bigger debate's simple. You have an Obama administration that represents government as usual, slow economic growth as usual, the worst economy since the Great Depression, and their answer is to do nothing. I mean, it's like all these mayors of cities that are going bankrupt. They're sitting here saying, oh, protect everything. Well, you know, Stephanie just talked about the problem with student loans. Well, the problem today is under the Obama plan, even if you can get through college, you can't find a job. So I think that this will be a straightforward debate. Do you want a more dynamic economy, more jobs, a faster growing country, and a smaller government? Or do you want a much bigger government with a much bigger deficit, with fewer jobs and a much smaller economy?
You heard Eric Fehrnstrom essentially say it isn't a problem that neither Mitt Romney nor Paul Ryan have any significant foreign policy experience. But you've been on the world stage. You know that this is complicated. You know that, these are very thorny issues, and we're looking at a lot of them right now. How do they deal with that foreign policy gap?
As a sophisticated Washington reporter, I'm going to shock you. I think it is an advantage that they are not part of the current mess. Remember, first of all, Paul Ryan's about the same age as John F. Kennedy and Theodore Roosevelt. So you can have young, aggressive leadership that's pretty impressive. Second, remember that Mitt Romney has exactly the same amount of foreign policy experience as Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan defeated the Soviet Empire decisively in 8 years. So I would rather have Romney and Ryan rethinking everything than have the current team continue. Look at the disaster in the Middle East. Unrest in Libya, Egypt, Gaza, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan.
But do you feel that you know what Mitt Romney's foreign policy philosophy is? Do you feel like he laid it out when he went overseas?
The overseas trip was not an effort to lay out a philosophy. I think I know how Mitt Romney will approach foreign policy. He will be very cautious. He will think about America's interest first. He will apply a decision-making process that relies very heavily on facts, and he will distrust the State Department. Now, I have to tell you, as somebody who's had, as you point out, had a lot of experience in this business, I am for any candidate who distrusts the State Department over a candidate who trusts the State Department.
Well, Newt Gingrich, really appreciate you bringing your insights this morning. Obviously, you've got had a lot of experience debating Mitt Romney, and you know that Paul Ryan's a tough debater as well. Thanks for being with us this morning. Appreciate it. And we'll be right back.
This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by America's Natural Gas Alliance. Smarter power today.
Every day, all around the world, energy is being produced to power our lives. While energy development comes with some risk, North America's natural gas producers are committed to safely and responsibly providing generations of cleaner burning energy for our country. Drilling thousands of feet below fresh water sources within self-contained well systems and using state-of-the-art monitoring technologies, rigorous practices help ensure our operations are safe and clean for our communities and the environment. We're America's Natural Gas.
been years in the making. And there are many years ahead. Join the millions of members who've chosen an AARP Medicare Supplement insurance plan insured by United Healthcare Insurance Company. Go long.
The setting for Mitt Romney's big announcement yesterday was picture perfect. Majestic battleships, swelling music, enormous crowds. As you saw at the top of our show, it all went off without a hitch, except for this key moment at the very end of Romney's introduction.
The next president of the United States, Paul Ryan.
During the ensuing applause, Romney realized the error, or someone told him, and he quickly jumped in to correct himself.
Every now and then I'm known to make a mistake. I did not make a mistake with this guy. But I can tell you this, he's going to be the next vice president of the United States.
Nice save. Romney's not the first presidential candidate, though, to get swept up in the moment. Here was then Senator Obama 4 years ago.
So let me introduce to you the next president, the next vice president of the United States of America.
There are other similarities between the two announcements. Both Mr. Obama and Mr. Romney revealed their pick on a Saturday. Both chose a longtime member of Congress. Both their picks are Roman Catholic, but that's about where the similarities end. Joe Biden was 65 years old when he was chosen. Paul Ryan is 42. Ryan is steeped in the budget. Biden had a reputation as a foreign policy expert. And while Biden accepted the VP spot after 2 failed bids for a presidential nomination, Ryan spent the earlier part of this campaign season denying he was even interested in the job. When he appeared on Face the Nation last March, he said, "If I wanted to be president or vice president so badly, I would have run for president." Well, when the call comes, I guess it's hard to say no. We'll be right back.
Wherever you find people who need raw materials delivered and finished goods shipped. Wherever you find people who need to get things there on time and from factory to store. Wherever you find business, you'll find us.
This is Rudy. His morning starts with arthritis pain and 2 pills. Afternoon's overhaul starts with more pain, more pills. Triple checking hydraulics, the evening brings more pain, so back to more pills. Almost done when, hang on, Stan's doctor recommended Aleve. It can keep pain away all day with fewer pills than Tylenol. This is Rudy, who switched to Aleve and 2 pills for a day free of pain.
And try Aleve for relief from tough headaches.
Some of our stations are leaving us now, but for the rest of you, we'll be back with more on Campaign 2012 and Mitt Romney's new running mate with a reporter's roundtable. We're going to talk about whether the Ryan pick was a bold or risky choice, maybe both, and be sure to tune in to 60 Minutes tonight for Bob Schieffer's interview with Mitt Romney and Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan. Be back in a moment. We'll see you all very shortly.
Tonight on 60 Minutes, Romney and Ryan in their first interview together. The new Republican ticket, only on 60 Minutes, tonight.
Don't miss The Mentalist on its new night, tonight, only CBS.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. Joining us to talk about the Paul Ryan pick, Washington Post columnist Ruth Marcus and Politico's Roger Simon, David Frum of Newsweek and the Daily Beast. Michael Gerson is also a columnist for the Washington Post and a former speechwriter for George W. Bush. Bob Shrum is a Democratic strategist and columnist for The Week. He's out in Los Angeles. But we're going to start with CBS News political director John Dickerson, who is out on the campaign trail in Mooresville, North Carolina, with Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. And John, what did you take away from watching this debut for Paul Ryan yesterday?
Well, hello, Nancy. I think the biggest thing is that Ryan has, his goal really is to, one, reintroduce Mitt Romney. He's talking about Romney's business career, his family. He's using his introduction to the country to reintroduce the candidate. And that's important. Mitt Romney has a lot of work to do in terms of the way voters think about him, imagining him as a president. Then Ryan also played the sort of traditional attack dog role, pointing out the differences and problems with the Obama administration. Then his other role, and we'll see how this develops, is that he is sort of the ideas man. The campaign is arguing that this is a bold choice because it's a choice to run on ideas and specific policies. But when Ryan talks, that's not really what he talks about. And so the question in the end will be, how much does the Romney campaign want voters to think about the idea that they have a plan, and how much do they want to get into the specifics of those plans?
And we heard Jan Crawford talk earlier in the show about how these two men seem to have personal chemistry. What's it like watching the two of them on stage? And I understand the crowds have been larger, more enthusiastic than they have been in the past for Mitt Romney alone.
Well, that's absolutely right. Here in North Carolina, the crowds are crazy compared to your normal Romney crowd. It's not only standing room only, but the crowd inside is just as big as the crowd outside. The rapport between the two men is very good. One of Romney's advisors, Bob White, who worked with Mitt Romney at Bain, said that Paul Ryan was the kind of fellow they would have hired at Bain. That's pretty high praise in this atmosphere, but they get along quite well. And, you know, there's a generational vibe here a little bit. Paul Ryan is as old as one of Mitt Romney's sons, and so the campaign is hoping that he brings a kind of youthful energy on stage, and that certainly has been evident in the last couple of days.
So then, Ruth, I'll ask you, given everything you just heard from John, does that mean that Mitt Romney made the right pick?
I don't think so, with all due respect. I love the idea of an ideas-driven campaign, but this seems to me to be extremely risky, and I'm going to go out on a limb. It feels like it could be Sarah Palin with substance and a paper trail.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is, look, vice presidential nominees are important to the extent that they tell us something about the presidential nominee. What this tells us about the presidential nominee is that he has decided, and there have been lots of questions about what does Mitt Romney really believe. He now has told us that he really believes in Paul Ryan's vision of America and Paul Ryan's budget. I thought it was very interesting that Eric Fehrnstrom in your interview didn't exactly answer the question of, does this mean he accepts every jot and tittle of the Ryan budget and all the other things that Paul Ryan has suggested all along the way. So I think what we're going to see over the next few weeks is just a continuing series of, well, does he think this? Does he want to have private accounts for Social Security? Does he want to cut domestic spending quite this dramatically? That's a different campaign than we've been running, and I think a pretty risky campaign.
But David, if one of the knocks on Mitt Romney, maybe the biggest knock by the Obama campaign, was that he didn't have any specifics, that he spoke in broad generalities, doesn't this kind of solve that problem? He's got a lot of specifics now.
Look what happened in the top half hour of your show. You spent the entire half hour talking about Medicare, Pell Grants, and the future of the American social insurance state. Every minute Mitt Romney and Barack Obama are talking about jobs, Barack Obama is losing this election. Every minute they're talking about something else, Barack Obama is winning this election. And when you just spent, and the candidates just cooperated in spending 30 minutes talking about something else. Barack Obama cannot win re-election on his job performance. He needs to change the ballot question. And Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan are cooperating with Barack Obama in changing the ballot question. And they need not to talk about what they want to talk about. They need to talk about what the American people want to talk about. That just got a lot harder.
Well, it's definitely nice to talk about issues, but Michael, one of the arguments that the Obama campaign is making is that this is a sign that the Romney campaign is worried about its base and needed to make a pick that energized its base rather than making a pick that might help them with independents and moderates and the people that they really need if they're going to win in battleground states.
Well, I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of Paul Ryan. You know, he does talk about the fiscal crisis that we're facing, which he should, because he's one of the few courageous politicians on this topic. He also talks about tax reform. He also talks about monetary policy. His whole message is actually a growth-oriented economic message. And to disagree with my colleague, the comparison here is not to Sarah Palin, it's really to Jack Kemp. You know,
His former mentor.
Right,
Work out that well.
Right, exactly. But wait. I mean, both Paul Ryan and I, by the way, worked for Jack Kemp at the same time in the 1990s.
Right.
He was profoundly influenced by that example. I think he can take that message, which he's really good at, to the Hispanic community, to working class voters, to a lot of other people. It's a hope-oriented opportunity message that Paul brings, and they need to get him out there on that message. He's going to be a real advantage on those set of issues.
Roger, one thing David Axelrod said to me was that this pick means that Romney will have a more peaceful convention, but a more difficult general election. Is that how you see it?
Oh, sure. I mean, he's going to get a bounce from this vice presidential pick. Candidates always do. He's going to get a bounce from his convention. These bounces disappear fast. I agree with Ruth. Everybody said how bold a choice this was. Bold is the new risky. This is an enormously risky choice for any number of reasons. One, it makes the election not a referendum on Barack Obama, but a referendum on the Ryan budget plan. And that's a plan that is going to be characterized by the Democrats as a plan to protect the deserving wealthy at the cost of the poor and of the middle class. Another risk is that Mitt Romney is telling people, you know, we really need to focus on my vice president, on my number two. The risk is that most Americans don't care about the number two. They care about the president. And even if Romney says, look, I don't believe in the whole Ryan budget plan, the fact is, if Romney and Ryan are elected, the Ryan budget plan is a heartbeat away from the presidency. I think this was all based on the fact that Romney was losing his base. This is, you have to hold on to the base. That's it. Forget about Hispanics. Forget about seniors, even though that's the only cohort that Obama lost last time. And forget about independents. Hang on to the base. Scare the middle class into thinking Obama is going to take your wealth away and give it to the poor. Have a huge get-out-the-vote campaign in November and hope that voter ID laws, which Democrats call voter suppression laws, will keep the Democratic vote down.
Bob Shrum, I want to bring you into this because, as you just heard Roger say, there are a lot of Democrats who are pretty thrilled with this pick. But wouldn't it be wrong for Democrats to underestimate Paul Ryan? I mean, he's a pretty tough debater, and a matchup head-to-head between him and Vice President Biden would be pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think that's right. First, Nancy, by the way, I should say that I've joined David Frum at Newsweek and the Daily Beast, so I just need to correct that. Secondly, I think that he will be effective in a debate, and I think people will watch with fascination to see how he does against Vice President Biden. But the big story here for me is every time we go through one of these vice presidential selections, we come up with a new rule. I mean, after Sarah Palin, the new rule is you got to make sure that your selection, the person you're picking, knows what they're talking about on foreign policy. I think the rule that we're going to come up with after this one is never pick a man with a plan. Because this guy is going to become front and center in this campaign. It's almost going to be the Ryan-Romney ticket instead of the other way around. All of those issues that were talked about earlier in the show, what's happening to Medicare, the privatization of Social Security, by the way, all of which in terms of the Ryan plan, Romney endorsed during the primaries, to pay for a tax cut that would let him pay 1% in income taxes, those are going to be central to this campaign. Secondly, he does help with the base. Roger's right about that. but he doesn't help with any of the places where Romney has profound weaknesses. First of all, with Hispanics, and I disagree with Michael profoundly about this, Romney is 44% behind with Hispanics. Paul Ryan voted for the fence. Paul Ryan voted against the DREAM Act, and he uses terms like anchor babies. In terms of women, he sponsored the personhood bill in the Congress that would outlaw forms of birth control. And seniors, 58% of seniors voted Republican in 2010. That was the key to the midterm Republican victory. You look at the new polls, for example, by the AARP in Florida, and it's basically a tie. All those seniors are now going to be pushed toward Obama. I think Paul Ryan is a perfect trifecta in terms of alienating some critical constituencies.
You know, Ruth, one thing I've noticed about Paul Ryan after covering him for years is that this guy is a happy warrior. I mean, he can be getting it from all sides. He was even getting a lot of heat from his own Republican leadership over his plan because it was so tough and really putting them in a difficult position. But he does not care. He plows forward, and that's very compelling when you're up on a stage and you're delivering what some people think would be political suicide, bad news about entitlements, but he believes in it wholeheartedly, and you can really see that.
That's absolutely true, and I think the best advocate for the Ryan plan is Paul Ryan. I've spent also a lot of time talking to him and Senator Wyden about their Medicare plan. I've written critical things about it, and he's always just been willing to engage and explain to me in a really nice way why I'm wrong. So if you're going to run on the Ryan plan, you might as well run with Paul Ryan. I just don't necessarily think, as some other folks have said, that's where you want to be wanting to run.
Yeah, I disagree with Bob Shrum. I think the Republicans do need a plan, but they need a plan that addresses the country's primary and present problems and not its secondary and future problems. The American economy is not adding jobs slowly in 2012 because of the problems of Medicare in 2022. It is adding jobs slowly now because of the burden of debt on households. It is adding jobs slowly now because of the housing crisis. And this is Barack Obama's biggest failure as president. He has not addressed housing. His housing policies, to the extent they exist, are horrible failures. The administration itself acknowledges that. That is the point to hit. Why are there no jobs? It is because of household debt. It is not because of what happens to Medicare after 2023.
Well, it's a simple misunderstanding of Ryan himself. I mean, I don't think it's risky for Romney to pick the single best economic spokesman of the Republican Party in an economy that's about the election. And Ryan does not just speak to Medicare. In fact, he has a much broader economic message.
What's his answer on housing?
I think this is a very insular attitude here. First of all, even
it's
on
the question,
even on issues that relate to the budget, the Democrats will focus on the micro issues, the effect of this cut on this group. Ryan and Romney will focus on the macro issue, which is we're headed towards Greece. That is a real issue.
We're not on the euro. We're not heading toward Greece.
Well, no, we are.
We're not heading toward Greece. It's completely ridiculous. The fact of the matter is, Newt Gingrich, who used the word lie, lied earlier in this segment when he said that unemployment in Greece was at 54% for young people because they're spending too much. It's at 54% for young people because of austerity. And Michael, you might want to talk about these micro points. But in the Ryan budget, which doesn't balance the budget until 2040, Mitt Romney would pay an effective tax rate of 1%, while seniors would pay $6,000 more for Medicare. Yeah, by the way, they could keep Medicare, but the cost of Medicare would go up, and they would have to make up the difference. Maybe what I should have said was, never pick a man with this kind of plan. This kind of plan is going to be poisoned politically in this election.
Roger, do you agree with that?
Just in case people are in a state of despair, let me make one prediction. This campaign will not be about wonkiness. It will not be about micro issues. Wonkiness does not play with the American people. I didn't know Jack Kemp as well as Mike, but I covered his presidential campaign. I covered his vice presidential campaign. He was a wonderful guy when he talked about football, and then he started talking about taking America to the gold standard. And you would see people in the audience saying, what the heck is he talking about? This campaign will be about the economy, but it will be about which team do I really trust? Which team do I really think understands a person like me? Which team cares about a person like me. And yes, I'll say it, it will be about likability, because no matter what else you say, go back through history, the more likable candidate almost always wins. And this is why Mitt Romney had to take a risk. He wasn't that likable.
And so, John, let me just bring you in before we have to go to break. So which team ends up being more likable? Now we know the field, it's set.
Well, it depends. If this becomes a committee markup in which every tiny detail of Paul Ryan's beliefs is discussed, that's a big problem for the issue, for the reasons people have mentioned. Also, because Ryan's the better spokesman than the guy at the top of the ticket. And even if Ryan is a happy warrior, that doesn't really matter unless Mitt Romney can be the happy warrior on those specifics. The Romney campaign is betting that in large part this election will be a referendum, but that there's a second piece, a smaller piece, but a second piece, which is that people have to like the ticket, and Paul Ryan helps with that, and also they have to have some kind of plan. The Romney campaign has to hope that people just like the idea of a plan more than digging into every tiny little detail of it. And so that's how it'll come to in the end.
Well, and I'm sure the Obama campaign is not going to let people forget about those tiny details. All right, we have to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about what this means for the Obama campaign. Do they now have to get more specific? We'll be back in 1 minute with more from our panel. Stick around.
In this fast-paced, digital everything life, there's nothing like experiencing the world's finest journalism in its original form. So subscribe today and save 50% on home delivery of the New York Times. Whether it's a full 7 days of everything the Times has to offer, or The Weekender, a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday subscription, choose what works for you. And so you don't have to unplug completely. Enjoy unlimited access to our website on any device, plus our apps for your tablet and smartphone at no extra charge. So sign up today for as little as $5.40 a week to receive the greatest newspaper in the world and all the incredible experiences that come with it. To save 50%, call 1-800-861-2256 or go to nytimes.com/save and order now.
And we're back now with more from our panel. And Bob Shrum, I want to start with you in Los Angeles. From a strategic perspective, which battleground states does Paul Ryan help Mitt Romney with the most? For example, can he help him with his own home state, Wisconsin?
I think he does help in Wisconsin. I still think there's a good chance the president will carry it, but he's got some real play there. People obviously know him there, and I think there'll be home state pride. I think he actually does hurt in Florida. I think he does hurt in Pennsylvania. I think conceivably he does hurt in Ohio. Because look, at the end of the day, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, we want to have a debate about big substantive issues. And by the way, we don't want to discuss the details, because the details are where you get to those big substantive issues. I think the Obama campaign, after Romney put Ryan on the ticket, is going to put Ryan on television for tens of thousands of rating points. And we're going to hear about a whole set of these provisions that he's proposed, whether or not it's in terms of the economy, in terms of immigration, or in terms of women's health. So I think that this is not a pick that's guaranteed to do very well in these battleground states. I agree with Roger. This was a base pick. There was a lot of dissatisfaction with Romney. The grumbling was beginning in the Republican Party. Usually the Democrats are the ones on the sidelines wringing their hands. So he's united the party, much, by the way, as McCain did with the Palin pick. But we'll have to see what the long-term impact of it is.
You know, Michael, Bob mentioned women's health. We've had a series of polls here at CBS News recently looking at battleground states. And in those states, Mitt Romney is trailing often by double digits among women. What does this pick mean for those numbers when you look at Paul Ryan's record on issues like abortion, where he has come out very strongly in favor of anti-abortion rights? Can they make up any ground among women with someone like Paul Ryan as the number two?
Well, he's a strong Catholic. He brings a certain perspective to this issue. I don't think that's necessarily a drawback. He's won in a pretty evenly divided district among Democrats and Republicans in a way that Kemp did in Buffalo, by having a very winning personality, by leading with conviction, not calculation. I think that some of that will carry here. I mean, he is you know, he's a very likable conviction politician. The question is whether you think that that's toxic in American politics. In fact, I don't think it is toxic.
I don't think that's toxic in American politics, and I think that any pick for a vice presidential candidate was going to have the same view on abortion as the majority of the Republican Party, and I think that is what it is. I have to disagree with the notion that Romney needed to make a base pick. I don't think so. I think the base is so motivated to get rid of Barack Obama and Obamacare and everything else that they were going to turn out, and they might be holding their noses, but they were going to go for Romney. And that's where I think maybe Romney needed to shake things up with a vice presidential candidate, but I'm not sure this way. If the Bain capital attacks, if the paying little in taxes attacks were taking a toll, why do you pick a guy whose tax plan is actually nicer to rich people than Mitt Romney's? I mean, his original tax plan had zero taxes on investment income, capital gains, and dividends.
David, isn't that going to be a huge messaging problem? We're in a weak economy, and Paul Ryan wants to slash taxes for the wealthy even more than Mitt Romney?
Look, it wouldn't be a problem if there were a convincing and credible explanation of how lowering these taxes would translate into economic growth and jobs. That's the issue, economic growth and jobs.
And we don't have a lot of proof that happens.
What we've got here is a fiscal message. This is going to be an election about the government's finances in a year when people want the election to be about their finances. It's the tragedy of this, because the president does not deserve re-election on his economic record, is Republicans are cooperating with the president in changing the subject. They are talking about what Republicans want, which is the future of the American welfare state, a very important question and on which the Republicans are right. But this is not the time. The time now is to talk about this economic emergency, and that about household debt, about job creation. That's where Republicans needed to be.
Roger, I have 20 seconds. I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, the fact is we've been in economic downturn since the day Barack Obama has been was elected, and he's won in all the polls so far. The question is, if it's really about the economic turmoil in America, why isn't Mitt Romney doing better? And I doubt that Paul Ryan is going to give him any one of the 3 states he needs, which is Florida, Ohio, and Virginia.
Great. Thank you so much to our entire panel. We'll be back in a minute.
We're still the place where we hope people will go to find out if something they heard is true or false. Sunday morning shows have become a part of Washington. They're the place where Washington talks to each other. So if somebody has something they want to announce, they come on the Sunday broadcast.
Dennis Quaid, Michael Chiklis, Vegas, CBS Tuesdays this fall.
While I was on a combat patrol in Bakuba, Iraq, a rocket-propelled grenade took my arm off at the shoulder. I was discharged from the Army, and I've been working with the Wounded Warrior Project since 2007. Warriors don't have to be severely wounded to be with the Wounded Warrior Project. We do have a lot of guys that have post-traumatic stress disorder. Being able to share your story, I guess it kind of helps you wrap your mind around what did happen over there. My name is Norby, and yes, I do suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, but I'm okay.
Embarrassed by a prostate exam? Imagine how your doctor feels. As a urologist, I have performed 9,421 and a half prostate exams. So why do I do it? Because I get paid. And on this side of the glove, I know prostate exams can save lives. So if you are a man over 50, talk to your doctor to see if a prostate exam is right for you. If we can do it, so can you. CBS Cares.
I'm John. I was blinded in a chemical explosion that left me blind for 30 years. I was given my sight back through a cornea transplant. All I had wanted was to see my children for the very first time. When they removed the bandages, I looked across the room, and sitting there was my family. I could see them.
You have the power to donate life. Be an organ, eye, and tissue donor. To find out how, go today to donatelife.net.
We'll all get to know more about Paul Ryan in the coming days, but when Bob interviewed him back in May, when it was beginning to look like Mitt Romney would get the Republican nomination, Ryan gave us a little insight into how he thought Romney should react to Democratic attacks. That's our Face the Nation flashback.
If Mitt Romney
gets the nomination. Now he's out there. Doesn't he become the face of what President Obama is trying to say? He said, look, this guy made $20 million last year, and he's paying less than 15% of that in taxes. You're having to pay more tax than he is, and that's unfair, and we ought to do something about it.
Yeah, so I think that's clearly going to be the strategy if that's the nominee we have. But what is important for Mitt Romney to do is take the moral high ground on these issues. Take on the beauty of our free enterprise system and defend it fully, defend it confidently, and go to the American people not with a envy and division and resentment strategy, which is really what the president is doing, and go with a unity strategy, one that simply appeals to people based on our founding principles and how we're going to get this country together and how we're going to take on these challenges that the president has ducked, which as a result have made us so much worse.
Paul Ryan's take on what the Republican strategy should be before he knew he would be Mitt Romney's running mate. Today's Face the Nation flashback. We'll be right back.
It's something you're born with and lives inside you. Inspires the things you choose to do. Things that may not always change the world in a big way, but can change it in a million little ways. You do what you do because it matters. At HP, we don't just believe in the power of technology. We believe in the power of people when technology works for you. To do the things that matter. To dream. To learn. To create. To work. If you're going to do something, make it matter.
This is New York State. We built the first railway, the first trade route to the West, the greatest empires. Then some said we lost our edge. Well, today, there's a new New York State. One that's working to attract businesses and create jobs. The place where innovation meets determination and businesses lead the world. The new New York works for business. Find out how it can work for yours at thenewny.com.
Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu, Elementary, new drama CBS Thursdays this fall.
Bipolar disorder is a brain condition that causes unusual or dramatic mood swings. It affects millions of Americans and compromises their ability to function. When diagnosed, bipolar disorder can be effectively treated by mood stabilizers. But most people with bipolar disorder suffer for years without help because the symptoms are missed or confused with other illnesses like depression. Learn how easily you can help keep this from happening to a loved one. Visit cbscares.tv.
When every moment matters and a hand reaches out, when someone gives blood and a life is saved, that moment when heartbreak turns to hope, you're there through the American Red Cross. Every day, the Red Cross responds to nearly 200 neighborhood emergencies, and your support makes it possible. Use this moment to join us today. Visit redcross.org.
Be sure to tune in tonight to 60 Minutes for the first joint interview with Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, conducted by our own Bob Schieffer. For now, I'm Nancy Cordes. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.